Hi everyone, welcome to this week. We're going to be learning a bunch of clauses, most of which use the subjunctive and function as noun, hence the name noun clauses. All right. Okay, so we've learned some indirects. We've learned indirect statement, all right, which is up here. So now we're going to learn two more, which are indirect question and indirect command. And this chart up at the top here is just a way to organize them. What I'll point out is that indirect statement use the infinitive, indirect question and command will use the subjunctive. Excuse me. All right, but they imply the same thing. So essentially, a reported version of whatever it is that you're saying. So indirect statement was a reported speech, or reported speech. Indirect question, of course, is going to be a reported question, and indirect command is going to be a reported command. And we'll take a look at that more when we get to it. All right. So we've got these sort of clauses divided into different categories. The main one is going to be this ut, the clauses that are introduced by this use of ut, and then ne, of course, is its negative. All right. And then we talked about indirect questions, and then, of course, infinitives are going to be the indirect command. So these are kind of just clauses in general, sort of dependent clauses, subordinate clauses, substantive clauses, which is another word for noun clauses. All right, these are just the different categories to give you an overview. So let's some specifics. All right. Okay, so essentially what we've got are what are called noun clauses of result. We've talked about result clauses before, but these are sort of a little bit of a subset of that. And basically they are opened up with a verb often that means to happen, all right, to make, to bring about, something like that. All right, so the general structure is either it happens that, all right, so it's an impersonal use of the verb. Sorry, I put the Latin there by accident. All right, and then you go into the clause, and the that is going to be that ut, right? Ut is going to introduce it. All right, and then you see the examples down here. They can also be personal. So I will make them all understand. I will make it that they all understand is another way of putting it. Excuse me. And then this make them all understand, that is going to be our subjunctive, and that is going to be our noun clause. All right, so this is indirect question. All right, so indirect question, as I said, is going to be the reporting of a question. So the direct question, what did he do? All right, that's our direct question, right? And then you can see the indirect version down here. I ask what he did. I am asking what he did. You can obviously also put it in the past. I asked what he did. That would, of course, change the verbs in the Latin, all right? So you can see here, there's our I ask, and then here's our indirect question. So indirect question is going to have that question word, just like it would in a direct question, some sort of interrogative word, and then it's going to have a subjunctive verb, and it's going to be introduced by a verb of asking. It's got to be some sort of asking verb. Now, that can be a little flexible. They're not always going to be verbs that mean ask. They can be like wonder or something like that. But those are the three kind of main things. And you need those for an indirect question. You need some sort of interrogative word, you need a subjunctive verb, and you need some verb to introduce the indirect question. Right? And then the other examples here just go through the different tenses in indirect question. All right, indirect command is similar. It's just subordinating a command. All right. So, again, the direct command, trust that leader. All right, and then the indirect command, I advise you to trust that leader. So here's our direct command kind of buried in the indirect command. All right, this is going to be introduced by ut. All right, indirect command is going to use ut for its clause word. There will be some sort of command verb to introduce it as kind of part of the main clause. Again, I can't have an indirect command with a verb like run, right? I need some sort of ordering verb. Again, it'll be a little broader than just ordering, but that is the basic idea. And then these are just different examples of indirect commands, and you can see the Latin to the left. But you can see all the uts, right? That's going to introduce my indirect command, and the negative is ne, as in that last example. All right, this is what's called a fearing clause. A fearing clause is basically just a type of noun clause. The trick with the fearing clause is that its ut and ne will be reversed. So, ne will actually introduce the positive, and ut we'll introduce the negative. The reason that seems to be is that the fearing clause, or the fearing verb, I should say, that introduces it is considered a negative, and so the negative fearing verb plus the negative conjunction cancels out and makes a positive, right? It's almost like negative numbers. So negative verb, negative conjunction equals positive, whereas negative verb, positive conjunction equals negative, and that's where the nay ends up being kind of the positive, all right? So in other words, here, right, I'm afraid that they will come, okay? The nay is the positive. There's no not in the main clause, whereas here, I'm afraid that they will not come. Okay? The ut includes the negative. As with the other verbs, you need a verb of fearing, some sort of specific verb to introduce it. In this case, a verb of fearing to introduce the fearing clause, and ut and nay are the conjunctions, or I suppose I should say nay and ut. Excuse me. Okay, so here's some examples, and I think they'll, it's hard to talk about them in the abstract, especially so many of them. All right? Okay, so there are 3 subjunctive verbs in an indirect question. All right, so what are they? So stet, which is a first conjugation verb, sustaneant, a second conjugation verb, and constituent, all right, a third conjugation verb. And then what's the interrogative word that begins the indirect question? This is a little tricky because it's not commonly thought of as an interrogative word, but it is ut, and in this case, ut as an interrogative means how. So you see how. All right, Soracte, which is a mountain in central Italy. So you see how Soracte stands white with deep snow. All right, and the laboring woods, the laboring forests, don't now bear the burden. All right, the weight of the snow. All right. And the rivers flow with sharp cold or sharp ice, something like that. All right, but the important thing is, excuse me, all right, you see how it stands. You see how they bear. All right, how does it stand? That's the direct question. You see how it stands. That's the indirect question. All right, so there's an indirect command. All right, so you have an indirect command underlined. All right, is the indirect command positive or negative? So it has that nay. All right, so for indirect command, that's going to be negative. If it were a fearing clause, that would be positive. All right, so what is the verb of commanding? All right, so that's going to be deek, tell me, deek mihi. All right, and then finish the translation. So, Hedulus, if you hurry, all right, tell me, and then how would you translate ne properam? Properam means to hurry. All right, so Hedulus, if you hurry, tell me not to hurry. All right, so there's our indirect command. All right, it's another indirect command, so 4 subjunctive verbs in the indirect command. All right, so relinquant, temptant. I went out of order a little bit. All right, so statuant is our main verbs. They decided, all right, to try, temptant. I'll get to the other verbs, by the way. I know I forgot them. They decided to try. They decided to try. All right, to deceive their guards in the silent night and to get outside. This is about essentially the Romeo and Juliet story, but the ancient antecedent of it. All right, and when they left home, they decided to leave behind the roofs of the city. All right. Okay, and, or, all right, lest they wander in the kind of wide open spaces in the fields, they decided to meet, all right, at the bust of Ninus, an ancient king, and they decided to hide under the shade of a tree. So in other words, this statuant, all right, is in charge of temptant, is in charge of relinquant, is in charge of conveniant, and where's the other one? Is in charge of lateant. So those are the 4 verbs, all dependent on that indirect command. All right. Try to get outside, leave the ruse behind, meet at the bust, hide under the tree. Those are the direct commands, right? They decided to do all those things. Those are the indirect commands. All right. So if we translate that first line, where's my pen? Got it? Okay. So here's my verb of asking or commanding. All right. So he asks you, all right, to stay ut resistas, friend. All right. Oh, sorry. The hic tacitus lapis is the he. So this quiet stone asks you to stay, friend. This is actually a grave marker, a grave stone that actually is personified by its maker, right? So if you imagine like a cemetery with all the stones, this quiet stone asks you to stay, friend, and then it goes on and on. So, but this is that indirect command, asks you to stay, ut resistas. All right, so here's a fearing clause. All right, so metuit is our verb of fearing. All right, veniat is our subjunctive in the verb of fearing. All right, and then this whole thing is the fearing clause, including the main verb. The fearing clause itself is just presos to artus. This is the story of Pygmalion. It's about a sculptor who essentially falls in love with his sculpture. And right now he's thinking that it's alive, and so is afraid he's going to hurt it. So he is afraid. He, this sculptor, he was afraid, metuit. All right, that a bruise, lior. Let me get this guy going. So he's afraid that a bruise, all right, would appear on her limbs, which he was holding. All right, so in other words, like he thought she was so sensitive, fragile, that even if he just held her arm, that she might bruise. All right, and note again that with the nay, it's the positive. So he was afraid that a bruise would appear on her limbs, which he held. All right, one more fearing clause. All right, so what do you want here? All right, I'm afraid, all right, of your words. All right, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid, now the fearing clause is kind of understood. I'm afraid, all right, that you have cursed me in epidamnus. All right, so there's like a metuo understood because he's answering the question. What are you afraid of? That, right? That's how, we'd say it in English / colloquially. You've damned me in epidamnus. And again, note the nay with the positive fearingness. All right, one more fearing clause, and then we'll move on to the summatives. All right, so I was afraid, I was fearing that, all right, his wife, my wife, might report about the cloak, and about lunch. He's essentially cheating on someone. All right, so I was afraid that she would talk about the pala and the lunch. But again, negative, nay equals positive fearing clause. All right, here's summatives. All right, we're translating from some Caesar. There we go. Apud Helvetios longa nobilissimus fuit et ditissimus Orgeterix. All right, so among the Helvetii, all right, by far the most noble and the wealthiest was Orgeterix. All right, so he, when Marcus Messala and Marcus Piso were consuls, all right, taken by desire for the kingdom, for power, all right, made a conspiracy, created a conspiracy of the nobles, and convinced the state to leave their borders with all their stuff. All right, telling them that it would be easy. All right. When they excelled, since they were amazing in virtue. All right. And to grab the power of all Gaul. All right, so I'll leave the rest. And then for the writing, we're going Latin to English. So obviously we're practicing the clauses. So you've got to make sure you know what clause you're dealing with. So they asked. So roga werant. This is my verb of asking. So I'm an indirect question. Who, quis, rex, nos. Now I need a subjunctive verb. Esset. All right, and here's my indirect question. Metuistine, question. All right, did you fear that the Senate would not? So not, negative fear and clause, I need my positive ut. Did you fear ut senatus? Oh, forgot the A. All right, pacem cum hoste. Faceret. All right, and I will leave the rest to you. That's it for this week. Thanks, and I'll be here next week. Please email me if you have any questions. Have a good week.